Switzerland is hosting a summit that starts today. It will aim to build broad international support for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's peace proposals that include the full withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine. But Moscow has not been invited. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US Vice President Kamala Harris have arrived at the venue. The summit is taking place at an alpine resort near Lausanne. It is intended to create a framework for lasting peace. Russia has dismissed the initiative as a waste of time, while the Swedes insist that Russia must be involved at some point and hope it will join the process one day. The non-attendees also include China, which has moved closer to Russia since its invasion of Ukraine. China, along with Brazil, is pushing for a separate peace plan for Ukraine that calls for the participation of both warring parties. Moscow has voiced its support for Beijing's efforts to end the conflict. Zelensky is hoping to put Ukraine's plight firmly back in the diplomatic spotlight after months of heavy global focus on the Gaza war. The conference, underpinned by elements of a 10-point peace formula presented by Zelensky in late 2022, is seen as a largely symbolic effort on the part of Kyiv to rally the international community and project strength against Russian might. But the question looming over the summit will be how the two countries can eventually end the war without Moscow attending. The conflict has also led to international sanctions against nuclear-armed Russia and raises tensions between NATO and Moscow. The summit comes as Russian forces have been making modest territorial gains in eastern and northeastern Ukraine. Now let's see who have been invited and who are coming to the summit. Swiss officials sent out around 160 invitations. About 90 delegations will attend. Roughly half will be from Europe. Although Zelensky led a diplomatic push in Asia and beyond to rally participation, sources say that a senior diplomat may represent India at the summit. Several dozen attendees will be heads of state of government, including from France, Poland, Japan, the United Kingdom, Germany and Canada. The major no-shows include US President Joe Biden, who was wrapping up his visit to Italy on Friday for a Group of 7 summit, opted to dispatch Vice President Kamala Harris, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Ben Harris is the founder and editor-in-chief of B&E Internews and also former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. Mr. Harris, welcome to the show. Would it have made any difference if Russia was invited to the summit?
Of course, it would have made every difference. In so much as the peace summit is a bit of a misnomer, in so much as peace discussions are not on the agenda, according to Chancellor Scholz. I mean, this is more a summit that's designed to do two things. One is to institutionalize the Western support for Ukraine, and we've seen various packages go through, 61 billion from the States and 50 billion from the G7 this week. And the second thing is it's an attempt by the Ukrainians to isolate Russia by rallying more countries, international states, to the Ukrainian cause. And in that sense, Zelensky must be very disappointed because some of the key countries with real influence, leverage over Putin, have decided to boycott it. And you mentioned China, but Saudi Arabia also is close to Moscow, is not going. The Indian delegation, as far as I understand, is downgraded. It's certainly not going at the head of state level. There's a fairly junior diplomatic representation. Brazil, same thing, not the head of state, relatively junior diplomatic delegation is going. Although all of the Europeans are going at the head of state level to show their ongoing solidarity. And you can't have meaningful peace talks without Russia being at the table. And interestingly, China also floated a peace proposal on the first anniversary of the start of the war and has been lobbying the delegates who are going in order to get them to discuss. I mean, China's actually working and wants to see this war ended. But the only thing on the agenda is Zelensky's 10-point plan. But that's a very maximalist position. It's not a serious offer of peace because it starts with Russia entirely quitting the Ukrainian territory, not just the Donbass and the other regions that they've taken, but including the Crimea, which is a non-starter for the Kremlin. And interestingly, Putin himself yesterday offered a ceasefire. He said that if Ukraine withdraws from the 4 territories that Russia annexed last year, then and also gives up its NATO ambitions, then Russia will be prepared to stop the war today and withdraw its troops immediately. And I think by that he's trying to make the point that there isn't a real peace negotiation there without Russia.
All right, let's talk about what you said there about China also planning its own peace initiative meeting, and it's planning to do this with the help of Brazil. How do you think that peace plan initiative will go?
Not very well. The Chinese peace plan, such as it is basically to freeze the conflict, pretty much the offer that Putin made, freeze the conflicts along the lines on the ground that there are now, and that to turn most of eastern Ukraine into a demilitarized zone and basically freeze the conflict and kick the discussions, the negotiations down the road to in the future sometime where the territory questions will be resolved. And for the Ukrainian side, I mean, that's a non-starter. They're not prepared to give up any territory, although the chances militarily of them driving them out of the country are non-existent. But as I said, China, wants to start the talks. And the Ukrainian side in Istanbul in 2022 had conceded that they would not give up the territory, but at least to freeze the conflict and start discussions. And I think that's what China's pushing for, because this is hugely destructive for everybody. Obviously for the Ukrainians, but also China, given its tension with the States, it doesn't want to see this escalate. It would like to calm everything down because everyone is getting dragged slowly into a third world war.
Okay. Mr. Aris, finally and very quickly, what do you think will be the ultimate takeaway or outcome of this summit? What are your predictions?
Well, until now, the aid to Ukraine has been ad hoc. And we saw that cause problems beginning of this year when America effectively cut Ukraine's supplies off, and Ukraine's energy sector is being completely destroyed in the meantime because the skies were open. It had no air defense missiles left. And I think what this summit marks is the attempt to institutionalize the aid. And America just did a 10-year security deal with Ukraine yesterday, I think, which would be formalized today. And that's all about making it predictable, of like committing yourself to long-term supplies of money and arms, which is what Ukraine wants and needs in order to stay in the fight. And then we're looking then at a long war with Ukraine be able to keep this up for several years at least.
All right, I've been talking to Mr. Ben Aris, who's the founder and editor-in-chief of BNE IntelliNews and also former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. Mr. Aris, thank you very much for talking to us today. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.